My name's Joris Peels, and yeah, I have the honor to, together with Michael, to host you today in this wonderful event. And Michael, as you may know, is the editor-in-chief of 3dprint.com, and he, together with me, will be asking the questions and welcoming you all here. And we've got a really interesting panel, I think, today. The format is quite simple. We're going to go past all the people in the panel one by one. We're going to ask them a little question, give them a short intro. We'll do that, just one sentence or something like that. And then we'll ask one or two questions pertinent to them. And then after we've gone by everybody, we're going to just have some panel questions. Now, those panel questions can also come from you. So, you just ask the questions in the Q&A where you can get them answered. We can't promise to get to all of them, but we'll try to get to as many as we can. And yeah, generally what the goal is of tonight is it's a very exciting time in 3D printing. We are seeing a lot of interest for end-use part production. We're seeing a lot of interest in manufacturing. We're seeing a lot of interest in investors, retail investors, institutional investors. We're seeing a lot of SPAC activity, and we're seeing a lot of there's a blooming time for us. But what does it all mean? So this is our opportunity to take stock. We've got an August panel of some of the most exciting and interesting people in 3D printing at the moment, all leading the separate initiatives. And these people are here at a very, very crucial time. And for all of them, it's the question is, do I go public? Do I stay private? How do I grow? And what is the future of 3D printing? So I think there's a really, really, very exciting moment here for all of us. And yeah, then I'd like to give it all off to my colleague, Michael, to kick things off a little bit with the questions. Thank you for attending.
Thanks so much, Joris. I think that was a great intro, great context for today's discussion. The one thing I think was missing is Joris forgot to introduce himself. He's the executive editor of 3dprint.com and I think vice president of consulting at SmarTech analysis. And so, yeah, he's a brilliant mind in the field, and I'm always learning so much from him and editing his articles. But yeah, so like Joris said, we're gonna just go around, introduce each of the members and start with a question for them. And the other panelists, you can feel free to add if the question seems relevant to your experience, or if your experience seems relevant to the question. So I thought we'd start with Brian Dow at Stifel. He's the managing director of Stifel's Global Technology Investment Banking Group. Stifel, if you haven't been following exactly, has been involved in about 13 of the most significant recent additive manufacturing deals, maybe even more since last night. Some of the latest have included the sale of X1 to Desktop Metal and the SPAC merger of 3D printing service bureau Fathom with Altamar. And then beyond that, Stifel led the Protolabs purchase of 3D Hubs, now called Hubs, the sale of 3D Systems on-demand business, and has done capital raises for X1, Stratasys, and Materialize. So in total, the bank has participated in something like 30 deals over the course of the past decade. So that makes it the financial institution with possibly the largest role in 3D printing so far. So yeah, Brian, I guess the first question we wanted to start with is, with all these SPAC mergers that are happening, what kind of company do you think is a good candidate for doing a SPAC? What company should pursue it?
Sure, Michael, thanks. And thanks everybody for joining today. And one you missed there is Shapeways, obviously with Greg Kress on this panel. I think what it takes, companies like Shapeways, like Fathom, like others that are tapping into the capital markets through the SPAC route, or like Xometry, which was our first traditional IPO in some time, is you just need to be a good company. You need to have a company that's got strong fundamental momentum. You've got to have a market ripe for disruption, which we think is especially keen in this market. Disruptive technologies going after large markets, and manufacturing is one of the largest markets in the global economy. You need a good management team. So you got to make sure you have somebody at the helm that investors can trust and invest in. Then you have to have a bench behind them to help be able to run the business. And ultimately, you have to have defendable technology. What's been proven is companies with something unique, something disruptive, especially from a technology perspective, is of keen interest to investors. And so, I don't think there's a blanket statement you need to be this big or growing this fast to be a public company these days. Obviously it's a case by case situation, but there's a lot of money chasing really interesting ideas. And, obviously we think it's a great time to be thinking about the public markets. It's not for everybody. We think it's important to make sure you have that story, an equity story, that if somebody would invest $1, just like in the private markets, how are they going to turn that into $3, $5, $10? So you need to have a growth story. Now, most companies are going to tap the M&A markets, frankly. If you look at transactions in M&A, that is one of the largest parts of our business, especially on the sell side, is that's going to be the likely outcome for a lot of companies. And that's what we're actually excited about the ecosystem. By having more public companies, you have more capital, you have more courage from venture funds to invest in the private markets, and you have more private equity looking to do M&A. Just more capital means more M&A, which means more equity in the private markets and the public markets. So we think 3D systems was kind of a onesie, 3D printing was a sort of a couple of deals a year market. Now we're seeing, frankly, since Desktop Metal went public, we've seen 71 transactions and almost $8.4 billion of capital, which is we've never seen in this market. So we think great companies can still tap the public markets and the M&A markets, and it's never been a better time to be in either digitization of manufacturing or 3D printing.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much, Brian. And so next, we're going to go to Mohsen Saifi. Mohsen is in charge of the Additive Manufacturing Global programs at ASTM. ASTM is a standards organization that's trying to bring order to chaos and try to bring standards and certification and standardization generally to 3D printing. And we haven't had this for the longest time. The longest time we had some committees that were concerned only with naming their technologies, which were called a profusion of different names. And now we're getting into aerospace manufacturing. We're getting into a lot more medical things, and standardization is becoming a very important thing. So, Mohsen, first off, thanks for coming, and thank you so much as well for what's we'll try to give us a little bit of an update. What is the status of standards development in 3D printing at the moment, Mohsen?
Absolutely, thank you very much, Joris, for the introduction, and thank you the organizers for putting such a robust panel together. It is very exciting to see so many key players being part of the panel and adding value to the conversation. My name is Mohsen Saifi. As Joris mentioned, I'm responsible for our global additive manufacturing programs at ASTM International. I've been involved in AM since about 10 years ago. And for those of you who don't know exactly ASTM is a global leader in the development of consensus-based standards with around 38,000 members from around the world. We've been around for close to 125 years and developed close to 13,000 standards that are operating globally, covering 90 industry sectors ranging from oil and gas, aviation, medical devices, construction, and many others. On the emerging technology areas, we cover technologies like commercial spaceflight, unmanned aircraft systems, exotechnologies, and many more. Now, with respect to additive, our history goes back to over a decade ago, where in 2009, Society of Manufacturing Engineers, on behalf of the industry and many other stakeholders, reached out to ASTM to really request creating a committee on 3D printing. You should know that the term additive manufacturing, in fact, has been coined in 2009, or we needed to name this committee. There were many terms to choose from, obviously, but from the consensus, we landed on additive manufacturing would really represent the industry. Now, in 2011, ISO also established a committee on AM, and since then, ASTM F42 committee and ISO TC261 has been working very closely together. We have a partnership agreement to jointly develop standards, serving the industry and helping adopting the technology. In particular, the F42 committee consists of close to 1,000 members from over 40 countries, including industry, government agencies, and academia. Now, going back to your question, Joris, we certainly see a turning point in the industry with the maturation of the technology, platforms, hardware, software, all the technology providers, as well as service providers, the demand for high quality standards keeps growing. And the drive mainly comes from the industry and regulatory bodies that really care about no kidding applications. And by that, I mean real applications where the quality is of concern. The AM ecosystem obviously is getting further matured, and we believe this is just the beginning of many decades of progress. Our analysis of the market demonstrated that almost every industry sector either fully embrace additive technologies or is in the midst of embracing that. 10 years ago, the situation was totally different, and many sectors were not really looking seriously for AM adoption. Of course, the pandemic helped quite a lot as a result of supply chain disruption, as we heard from some of the previous panelists. Now, that puts some pressure on the technical experts in the field, and our focus, obviously, to write the standard, and we're predominantly relying on our members. We continuously monitor, support, and develop the needed standards that our focus is on rapidly closing gaps. And this is only possible by everyone's contribution and supporting from government funding. In terms of the status, the good news is that the standardization has been accelerated significantly since the past 3 years. There has been a lot of focus on one modalities versus the others, and that was powder bed fusion technologies, but we've seen DED has been really picked up, and binder jetting in the really past 2 years has been really the cornerstone of attention, a lot of standardization activities as well. So there's a lot of excitement in the standard development community, and we truly believe what defines the future is the adoption of this technology would be access to high quality standards, so we can create a trust. And what we see today is that the governments are contributing further to the standardization process by more proactively by providing resources and supports. I'll stop here.
Thanks so much for that great answer. So we're going to just move right along to Greg Kress at Shapeways. So Shapeways, as we know, has become a really leading service bureau in 3D printing, and is about to embark on a SPAC vote, I think, just later this month. So I think they're, getting set to get listed. And this is a question that maybe some of the other companies can consider as well. But so how's the SPAC process been for Shapeways? What's it enabled you that, other options didn't?
Yeah, well, thank you first and foremost for having Shapeways on the panel. It's great to see everyone and seeing all the messages on the side here as well from the other panelists. It's good to connect even virtually. So, but yeah, Shapeways went out looking last year for multiple paths on raising additional capital for the business. And, ultimately we saw this SPAC as a great vehicle for us to go and really accelerate some of the growth opportunities that we see inside the business. Over the last several years, we've invested a lot of time and energy, not only in improving our manufacturing capabilities, but also the software platform that goes and manages that. And that software platform is very scalable. And so as we went out and looked at partners and ways to go raise capital, we found a really great vehicle in the SPAC process. And we've learned a lot through the process. We've been able to choose a really great partner through our SPAC partner, our sponsor, in Galileo Corp. They've been incredibly helpful through the process, kind of shepherding us through it and managing our investor base. And then ultimately we were able to raise a pipe with some really great investors that believe in the vision of the business and where we're going. And so, right now we're getting down to the end of the process. I think the process is taking a little bit longer than we had hoped, and that's mostly driven by increased regulations and things that are coming out through the overall market. But, I think the good thing for us is that we've had a really strong pipe and a SPAC sponsor kind of behind the business. And so we continue to make good progress. This past week, we announced that we went effective with the SEC. And so we're now down to the last couple of weeks of marketing before we finish the vote. So overall, it's been a really, really good vehicle for us. And I think what it's going to do is it allows us to raise upwards of 200 million of fresh capital for the business to really go and accelerate a lot of our growth initiatives. So, so far, so good. We're really, really happy with the decision and the progress that we've made so far.
Anyone else who's participating or has participated in SPACs, like Mark Forged is in the process, or actually just completed the process, and Desktop Metal completed at the end of last year. How has that gone for you, and what has it brought to the table that you wouldn't have been able to accomplish otherwise?
Yeah, I'll be happy to answer that, Michael, on behalf of Mark Forged. So we completed our process with the NYSE and listed, formally started trading on the 15th of July. So it's been roughly 2 months since we started trading. I think our view was the access to capital was compelling, sufficiently so that we accelerated our timelines to what previously might have been an IPO timeline to take advantage of the SPAC market. And I think for us, it gave us an opportunity to focus on a set of long-term investors that we want along for this journey with us. And so far, that has sort of proven to be the appropriate strategy for us as we continue to see our larger shareholders accumulate in the aftermarket. And what we saw may be no different from what others have experienced, but between the process of the pipe closure and the actual listing, we saw many of our pipe investors accumulating shares of the SPAC in the market before we had completed the transaction. So in many ways, it solidified an investor base for us, and we continue to have and continue to cultivate good relationships with a relatively modest number of larger investors. So it's been good for us from that perspective.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Now, next we're going to go to Stratasys, which is one of the largest companies in 3D printing, and a company that went public a very, very long time ago. For the last 18 months, it's been run by Yoav, and Yoav is now running a company that years ago had just one technology, fused deposition modeling or material extrusion. Now, in very quick order, it's acquired its own SLA, its own DLP technology, and now is becoming a company with very many different technologies. So we're very curious to see if Stratasys wants to lead in all of these different technologies, and how you're going to do that balance of leading in all of them. From Yoav.
Thank you, Joris, for the opportunity, and thank you, Stifel team, for the opportunity. Such a great panel. Privileged to be part of it. So I'm Yoav Zeif, I'm the CEO of Stratasys. I joined the company in March last year, in the middle of the pandemic, or the breakout of the pandemic. And actually, most of my expectation realized we are really privileged as an industry, that we are working in, in almost an unlimited potential industry. And I'm sure most of the participants will share this feeling with me. Stratasys is focusing within this unlimited area on polymer, going to manufacturing, and we position ourselves, and we are the highest end of the market. For us, 80-20 is not a solution. We are focusing on being the high end of the market, and we are doing it with the best and the most advanced customers that practically working with us to develop solutions. And within that, I would say that what is really Stratasys is the full package. And for being the full package and for delivering the dream, we had to expand our technological portfolio. So technology-wise, we moved from 2 technologies to 5 technologies. And we moved there To be honest, I wanted to say that was something very brilliant that I brought to the table. Unfortunately, not. It's simply because my customers asked me to do it. Our customers practically were asking us, we want to have one or two leading, and sorry guys, all the spec around us. At the end, I heard from at least 3 customers before I even joined, we are looking for one or two operating system, one or two leaders that will go to us or will take this journey with us. So when you're saying moving from 2 to 5 technologies, it came from the field. This is number one. The second important strategic, I would say, perspective on this is the fact that there are clear synergies. Once you are focusing like us on polymers, there are very clear synergies between the different technologies. It's the same go-to-market. You support it with the same resellers network. It's more or less the same for sure, the same software platform. And we can go into the details of what does it mean software and I'll be happy to do it. What does it mean software in additive manufacturing and in the move from prototyping to manufacturing? It's the same, relationship on the material side, a lot of synergies within photopolymers and thermoplastics, and also same relationship with big customers and with big material players. So there are a lot of synergies. We started and we were and we are still leaders in material jetting, in material extrusion, and we added SLA, ELP, and SAF, which is powder bed fusion, but with what we call the selective absorption fusion. When you put all of this together with our experience with SDM, we know to print parts, and we understand exactly, and we know SLA, we know DLP, we know SLS. We are doing it on a daily basis as one of the biggest service bureaus in the world. When you put all of this together, it's a great offering, which we believe, and also our customer, will advance additive manufacturing and their business.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, so we're just going to keep moving along so that we can introduce everybody as we go. But we do want to turn back to some of those topics in a minute. Next, we're going to head to Max Lebowski, who is the CEO of Formlabs. And most of us should know who Formlabs is. It's like one of the most exciting startups in the space, made desktop SLA a thing. And now is moving on, including desktop SLS, and so very exciting things happening there. And I guess that brings us to sort of the question that might be on a lot of people's minds: is when are they going to be able to invest in Formlabs as a public entity? Are you planning on doing a SPAC, or if not, why are you staying private for the time being?
Yeah, this has certainly been a huge point of discussion for us over the last year or so, and obviously we considered whether we should jump in and go public, like many other startup 3D printing companies have done, and ultimately what we concluded is that there's a lot of downsides to rushing to be public and not taking your time to set up a company and do it correctly, and also not taking the time to have all of the predictability and metrics. And I think that's the trade that most of the SPAC companies have done. They've said they're not quite ready, but it's worth it for the cheap capital. We were actually more ready. We have more revenue than any 3D printing company started in the last 20 years or so. So we felt closer to that point, but we still felt it was the right thing to continue to develop the company and prepare to go public in a way that is more typical outside of sort of the crazy public market experience of the last year. I think we made a lot of progress towards that in the last year, and we certainly could go public in the near future if we chose to, but we'll continue to optimize for the long term, which is, our goal is to build a leading company in this space, and that's a 5 or 10 year problem, whereas going public is a small decision in the short term that we wouldn't take it in a way that might compromise that sort of longer term goal.
I think that was interesting. I don't know if Joris wants to tackle that point. Go for it, Joris.
No, I think it's interesting that we'll move right along to Rick Fulop of Desktop Metal. I think if there's one company that really kind of epitomizes the SPAC trend and has uses the great effect to become a very acquisitive company that has really ran to, well, it acquired X1 very famously. That's still, I think, the talk of the 3D printing industry, and also acquired Hydro, which is an application-based 3D printing company and making manifolds. And it also acquired Aerosynth, another company. So yeah, really, I'd be really interested to learn from Rick. I mean, you seem like a guy who has, well, not enough time on his hands to really grow the business. Is Desktop Metal like kind of like a roll-up for 3D printing? Is that how we see you guys, that you're going to just grow, or what's the deal there?
I think that 100% of the focus of our company is enabling mass production with additive technology. So today we've got a series of technologies. We started with high-speed binder jetting printing, our single pass jetting technology that's been shipping now since last year in our P1 systems. We'll ship in Q4 in our P50 systems, which is the fastest metal printing process in the market for direct metal parts. And we saw an opportunity last year to raise a lot of capital, primarily based on the track record we had building other businesses. But before I did this company, I spent 5 years investing in the space and deployed 130 million in capital that today's worth over $1 billion. So we leveraged that record at the early part of the pandemic to sort of flip our business and raise capital so that we could become a consolidator. In the areas that we focus on, we've got three areas, and we've laid out in our strategy. One is print processes that are focused on high volume mass production. So these are area-wide processes like DLP or DLP arrays, where there are semiconductor scaling laws that improve the productivity of those systems over time by either the diodes having more power every couple of years, or the systems having higher resolution, which means more parts per unit area. And on the binder jetting side, where inkjet has been doubling in throughput every 18 to 24 months for the past 20 years. So it's now reaching a point where you can build single pass systems that are very high throughput. So we're successful in raising a lot of capital and kind of redefining the space, competing with conventional manufacturing versus tooling and jigs and fixtures, which has been the past in this industry. And every one of the things that we've picked up has been strategic to accelerate the timeline that we laid out when we went public. And the case of the companies that you've laid out, for example, Aerosynth is a very good technology to do multi-material recoding, and you'll see those systems in our products in a couple of years. We feel like our transaction with X1 is going to be highly accretive and excellent for the industry to accelerate adoption of this technology at scale and provide more choice to customers. What we did with EnvisionTech was also quite strategic. It got us into photopolymer production, but with the core IP behind DLP production, which is really, in my opinion, the future of photopolymer printing. And we're going to continue to invest, and have continued to invest since we did that transaction, into area-wide photopolymer production, and have a rich roadmap of products and materials behind that. So we've had a pretty awesome growth clip. Grew 68% quarter over quarter last quarter, and we're setting up for a monster second half of the year. I think we feel really good about outpacing our competitors from a growth point of view, and growing faster in the market for the next couple of years.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Rick. Thank you. So another company that is getting up to be kind of well, on the one hand, it seems it does a polymer technology and a bound metal printing technology, and that's Markforged. And Markforged has also done a SPAC and is also in a similar market to well, either Formlabs or either Desktop Metal, depending on how you look at it. So I'd be interested in looking at finding out from Markforged a little bit about how they see the competitive space. Is it really, are you boxing up against these companies, or is it just this really wide open kind of area where everyone, there is no competition because there's only people that don't know about 3D printing kind of, is it that kind of thing? How are you going to see the landscape?
Yeah, thanks, Joris. I think it's obviously a combination of all of those things and more. We focus very tightly on the manufacturing world, and we focus very tightly on a smaller number of industries that we have educated ourselves on and focus on our go-to-market strategy. And those are things like aerospace and automotive, and other areas where there is heavy manufacturing. So we focus on MRO. We focus on where our parts can replace heavier composite parts, replacing heavier metal parts in things like robotic arms, for example, or where there are strategies to reduce corrosive impacts or other impacts from metal using a composite part. So with that tight focus, we still believe that there is an immense available market. And I would say that we support the strategies of many of the companies that are on this panel, and are excited about their prospects for growth in the future as well. There is a bit of a awareness factor here that rising tide lifts many boats. So we want to see lots of folks be successful here, and believe that we are in the very, very early innings. I'm sure we all agree in this space. One of the things that we see in an area that we focus on is in that awareness and that education. So the next generation of engineers that has been and will continue to be coming out of our institutions for higher learning, at the collegiate level, are designing for additive manufacturing, where in the past that wasn't necessarily the case, or it was not the primary driver in the design world. And so working with those engineering teams at the manufacturing level asks lots of questions and opens up lots of possibilities and adds to the available market for what you can do with additive manufacturing. And I think that's what really excites us. There are several million manufacturing plants worldwide. I think there's over 1 million in the United States alone. And those really become our customers. Every one of them is, and I'm sure we're all on this panel, many of us speaking sort of the same language around this. The supply chain through COVID is driving lots of different and interesting sets of decisions around where do I produce my part? How do I make sure I have a source of supply? How do I make sure I have the part at the location I need it? And that's where additive really has an opportunity to assist. And those are the types of conversations we're having with our customers, both our existing customers who are looking to expand their portfolio of in additive manufacturing to cover more locations or more use cases, and our new customers and potential new customers that we're talking to that are either for the first time thinking about additive, or have some experiences in additive and want to understand where they have the best applications and where they have the best use cases. So again, starting with a tight focus around manufacturing in some specific industries, the available market opportunity is still enormous.
Yeah, I mean, it really does feel like we're still in the beginning, but also maybe in an exciting part of the beginning, maybe entering adolescence or something like that. So I forgot, because you spoke earlier, we forgot to say that this is Mark Schwartz, the CFO of Markforged. And yeah, so that's my bad. But we're going to I'm going to toss it over to Tyler Benster, who is a general partner at Asimov Ventures, which was founded in 2015 as an early stage venture capital firm dedicated to new technologies like 3D printing, but also including robotics and advanced computing and things like that. And so Tyler's been in the space for a while, since at least 2008, and worked with some pretty big names. So Tyler, I guess one question I'd like to direct toward you is sort of what you see the investment landscape being like right now, maybe in comparison to the past. 10 years ago, it was quite different. So yeah, just what do you see happening right now in the investment landscape?
Michael, thanks so much for having me here today, and wonderful to be up here with all the other panelists. I think that if you think back 10 years ago or so, maybe stretch it back a couple more, 2005 with Adrian Boyer and Hod Lipson introducing the matter fabricators and desktop replicators to the maker world. And subsequently, I remember in 2012, 2013, I think we were hosting one of our first startup competitions. I think it was 2013, and 3D Hubs came over from Europe and was trying to raise a Series A with all the American VCs. And I remember sitting around a room and they gave a wonderful pitch. No one bit, nobody was investing. And then they went back to Europe, raised a round, and of course they've done phenomenally well. But I think there's been, paved by the very hard work of people like, Max with Formlabs and Shapeways and Desktop Metal. Now the industry's changed quite a bit, and capital is no longer the constraint. I think that some other major transitions have been that people were originally getting into the space, at least when I was getting started kind of in the early 2010s, really, I think were attracted more by headlines by The Economist calling it the third industrial revolution, rather than perhaps by the fundamental advances that were enabled by the technology. And so I think if you look at today, what's been amazing is that we've seen additive manufacturing go from being a technology, a demonstration in many cases, used for more prototyping, used for rapid iteration, to an established technology that really is the bedrock of many industries. It's amazing how many industrial parts and devices that you can look around at and actually see additive manufactured parts that are there for production. I do think that when we look at kind of the future of where the space is going, at least some of the things that I'm most interested in, it's looking at some of these convergence of additive manufacturing with other existing established industries. So the semiconductor industry has been using additive manufacturing under a different name, perhaps, but for decades. And we're starting to see this convergence of this sort of new wave of additive manufacturing, more at the macro scale converging with the micro scale. We've seen these early explorations in multi-material that Stratasys and many others have pioneered that have now become looking at ways that we can actually create functional parts that go beyond just a simple geometry and shape. And so when I look at the scenario for startups in the space, I think that thanks to the giants of industry that are here on the panel today, it's never been easier to start a new business that has the potential to stand on the shoulders of $100+ million R&D and create a new interesting vertical or create a new market opportunity by being able to create geometries that have never existed to mankind before.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Tyler. I think it's a good summation, I think, of what's been going on. I think, but that brings us to my question. I'd like to ask this to anybody who feels like answering it. It's like, so it used to be, as Tyler pointed out, it was like the third industrial revolution. And we thought, I included, thought we were going to supplant a portion of traditional manufacturing. Now, a lot of people are saying we're complementary to mass manufacturing. So there's two things here. Like, one is, what is the technological vision? Are we complementary to mass manufacturing? Are we only going to go after the business cases that make sense to us, rockets, orthopedic implants, that kind of thing? Or are we some kind of industrial revolution and we're going to sweep everything aside? That's the first part of my question. I mean, is anybody interested in responding to that? Or
I'd be happy to take a stab at it, Joris. So, this industry has gone through multiple phases. You did go through a research phase in the 80s and 90s, and then sort of a tooling and jigs and fixture phase in the 2000s and turn of the, but now it's going into an end-use parts segment. And we make $12 trillion worth of end-use parts globally through a lot of installed capacity of many manufacturing processes like stamping and extrusion and different types of injection molding and forging, you name it. There are many ways to make components, parts, products. Products are usually an assembly of many parts. So usually printing is good at making parts. We don't print products today. There'll be a future phase of printing where we print full products, but it'll happen in our lifetime. I'm sure of that. I think this new phase that we're entering, the exciting part is for the first time, you're able to produce products that have 4 components that are needed to really break into end-use part mass production and compete with conventional manufacturing. So when we look at our company, we benchmark our processes by our ability to compete with existing processes and what the break-even unit point is. And if you look at our highest throughput systems in metal, we're usually cheaper at roughly 100,000 unit break-even versus casting. We're usually a third of machining cost, even if you're producing millions of parts. So up to a certain part component size. So it is conventional manufacturing is the competition. There's a large installed base of equipment, much of it depreciated, but the fact that you enable new things, it means this is going to be a very fast growth market for the next couple of years. People don't understand compounding and exponential growth. The reality is that this industry for the past decade has gone from $1 billion to roughly 19 billion by the end of year before the pandemic hit. And it did that by compounding at 20% year over year during the decade of the 2010s. And the last 3 years at 25% before the pandemic hit. And we're now back at 25% compounding. And so this decade will go from, the teens to the 150 billion in size, depending on what analyst you pick. And I think that if you look at it from historical point of view, I would equate this to being in the semiconductor industry in the 1950s, or I'm sorry, the 1970s, after the industry had been around for 20 years. And by the 1980s, semiconductors was $100+ billion industry. But in the 70s, it was roughly the same size as our industry is today. And there were many other ways to make products that didn't require integrated circuits at the time. So we look at e-commerce in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I think that's another analogy of where we're at in this industry. Not everybody's using it yet, but that everybody's going to be using it by the end of the decade, and we're gearing up for another 10 years of compounding. And so that's an exciting part of our industry, and the fastest growing segment is end-use part mass production.
Definitely. And Yoav, do you want to kind of build on that answer, or do you have maybe a different opinion on that?
Completely join the perspective of Rick. Just want to add my perspective. We as human beings, we try to define everything. Everything has to be in some framework. Is it complementary? Is it competition? Doesn't matter. It's big enough, and it's an evolution. So yes, now. And it's going with the development of the technology. The technology 5 years ago, when I joined Stratasys, I made like a major strategy review, getting into the details of the industry. The technology 5 years ago could not deliver the part quality that we can deliver today, period. And by definition, it's an evolution. So in order to cross the chasm, you have to start with different applications, because we are not an industry. We are a sum of different applications. And within those different applications, you penetrate into manufacturing. This is a fact. We just sold, probably, some analysts say it's the largest deal in the history of this industry to the US Navy last week. We're talking about $20 million, all of them for end-use parts, for MRO and end-use parts. So we start with application, we cross the chasm, we are complementary at this stage. Who cares? Okay? And the technology will evolve, and we will become competition, because in some size of batches, we simply have better economics. And we are developing within Stratasys tools. One tool is to identify the necessary or the most suitable technology for an application. The other one, once you choose or selected the right technology, how the economics the sensitivity of the economics compared to the current, mainly about volume, compared to current traditional manufacturing. It works. So we will open new application. We will start with short, maybe medium series of production, dozens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. And then the technology will be better. And at the end, we will see distributed manufacturing. It's only a matter of time. And I think that, I guess the panelists here will agree with me. It's great to have competitors, but at the end, we also, it's a competition, because if Mark is successful and Rick is successful and Max is successful, also Stratasys will be successful, and vice versa. So I think we are privileged to be in one of the most interested, unlimited potential industries, which evolve every day.
I'm interested actually. I'm interested actually in one thing. I think it's interesting that we're looking at semiconductor. We're looking at e-commerce. We're comparing ourselves to this big snowball kind of like effect. But at the same time, we don't really have an overreaching kind of narrative, or do we? I mean, the internet was supposed to be great, so everyone should go on the internet and it will disrupt everything. That was kind of the internet narrative, or it will disrupt all the communications. Is our overreaching narrative, is it we're going to disrupt, we're digitizing manufacturing? Is that it?
I think we have.
Or are we?
I think we have. And I'll let the panelists, add to it. I think definitely we have a narrative. We are moving manufacturing from, analog, long lines of production to a file and a system. This is a revolution. And we are doing it step by step by application, where the end goal is distributed manufacturing. It's a network of systems all over the world where the same company can produce in San Jose, and this is a real example, and in Japan, the same component with the same reliability and traceability. This is a revolution. If this is not a revolution, I don't understand what is a revolution. With very clear narrative, we go for distributed manufacturing. At least that's Stratasys.
And
I would echo what Yoav said, and I think that probably each of the panelists and our respective companies are attacking it a little bit differently, but with that same end goal in mind. And from our perspective, we've built our company on the notion of the connectedness of our community, and learning from each of those printers that are out in the field, taking that information and then pushing back updates out into the field that make each of those printers better. So that, for example, on the composite printing side, about 1.5 years ago, we released an update that improved the speed of those printers and some other efficiency metrics by over 100%. Doubling the speed of your printer when you turned it on the next day than the speed it was running at the day before. And similarly, we did that for our Metal X, our metal printer, about in the last quarter or so. And there are generally updates along the way that will also improve the printers, whether it's efficiency and lots of different areas that will provide updates. But it's that connectedness that enables us to learn from each of the printers out in the field, and then push those updates back out into the field for folks to take advantage of.
I'd like to offer a slightly contrarian position. I think everyone's in violent agreement that 3D printing will continue to grow as a portion of this large manufacturing market. We'll make more things with 3D printing over time. That's what's going to drive growth. Everyone's in violent agreement there. But I think we've built a bigger business with less money than other startups, and in large part that's been by actually going against the hype. I think the investor community has almost slowed 3D printing down by getting people focused on sort of big idea. We're going to replace injection molding or something like that, which we may eventually do, but it's years away. And the way you build a business is by building a product that people buy, next year or the year after, and that comes more incrementally. And I think if you look at the history of technology companies in interesting hardware spaces, like taking Amazon, for example. They were going after the huge potential of e-commerce, but that took 20 years to get. In the meantime, they started with a thing they could do today, like deliver books online, or same with Apple and mass personal computing. Compare that to their early personal computer products, which were useful for people at the time, but we're not necessarily exactly on a straight line to that long-term goal. So I think having the long-term goal is nice. It makes good pitching for investors. It doesn't actually help you build a product that people buy a year or two in the future. And that's what we focused on. And as long as we're continuously building the product people will buy a year or two in the future, then we're going to win.
We really appreciate your sort of, I don't know if it is contrarian, but at least we appreciate that sort of point of view where you can stir up the conversation a little bit. So I guess that raised two questions for me. One was, so you sort of said that maybe the investment community might be presenting some big ideas that distract people from the real work that's going on. And I don't know if someone like Brian or Tyler has an opinion on that. And then also we're wondering if Formlabs, you already mentioned a little bit about the SPAC stuff. If Formlabs plans on sort of going up market and trying to compete more with, these mass manufacturing type manufacturers like Stratasys and the like. So I don't know if Brian or Tyler wants to address that first question, and then Max can answer that second one.
Yeah, maybe Tyler, I'll go first. I'll let you talk about what private investors are looking for. What we've noticed is if you just rewind 10, 20 years ago, there was capital that flowed into this industry, but it was unclear how they were going to achieve a return. In a new industry, it's really, where the pavement has been sort of set with software. You raise money, you have 20 private equity funds that are going to buy you. You may go public if you hit the right KPIs. Or there's a bunch of strategics. So like in 3D printing, it was unclear. There's really two buyers for all of history, is Stratasys and 3D Systems. Then you got some new public entrants, and now you've seen a dearth of companies going public and raising money. So if you're a private investor, it's hard to have courage to put a bunch of capital and be, putting in $100, $200 million rounds like we've seen recently. But with companies going public, realizing liquidity for investors, trading at attractive valuations, which obviously markets are volatile, or finding new buyers like Desktop Metal, who's, bought 6 companies since you've gone public, and Fathom's bought 5 companies. Now you're starting to see an ecosystem. So what we've noticed in at least in our practice is the public markets have picked up, which has driven the M&A markets, but it still hasn't driven the private markets. So the stat I gave at the beginning of the talk was about $8.4 billion of capital since Desktop Metal went public. Only 670 million of that is in the private markets. And the lion's share of that has been from Formlabs' $150 million raise, and then Icon's recent $207 million raise. So what we're hoping to see is exactly that. The venture community that has realized returns recently, recycling that capital into the private markets, funding new entrepreneurs with new ideas, whether it's disrupting the world or, as Max said, coming out with a product that people want to buy in the near term. But we think that the 3D printing and broader manufacturing disruption, which includes automation, has been underserved by the venture community, the generalist market and the focused market. So I think what we're hoping to see now is that capital being recycled. So next year, maybe the balance will be more equal amongst the 3 different categories of public markets, M&A markets, and private markets. But once again, I think the success of everybody on this panel will drive further success of each other and new companies and new entrepreneurs and new investors to have the courage to invest in 3D printing.
Yeah, thanks so much, Brian. I think that's wonderful context and coloration. Of course, every investor thinks they're different. I think the same about myself, my partners. Alan, John Mackler, of course, are organizing this event behind the scenes. I got involved in 3D printing, building a rep wrap back in 2008, 2009. We love the space, we're immersed in it. And I think that instead of going for the shiniest toy in the room, like many VCs have gone after, we've just looked at opportunities where the technology meets a real problem and fits a customer need. So one of our early successes has been in a company, Additive Orthopedics, that was just acquired in the past calendar year. And when we met them in, I think, 2015, 2016, they were just printing these little screws for hammer toe surgery. And you look at this, you're like, it's a metal screw. How exciting is that? Well, that metal screw that costs $17 to print can be sold for $800, and it is a better product than what was currently available surgically. So it doesn't have to be a really exciting, object sometimes if it fits a really important need. And so I think that there's a multitude of opportunities, of course, way beyond just screws that are out there that don't require replacing injection molding in order to build a sizable business. It's funny that Brian mentioned recycling capital, and going back to Joris's earlier question and theme about sort of future of industry trajectory. One challenge I would sort of pose to all the panelists here today really is related to that of what kind of manufacturing industry we want to have for the future, since many of us here on stage are actively constructing this $100 billion plus manufacturing future. And in particular, if you look at our global consumption patterns and the massive amounts of waste that our current manufacturing and consumption habits have, it's really unsustainable over the course of decades or a century more. And if you look at 3D printing, on the other hand, many of our machines already process materials that go through heat cycles. And so what's quite interesting about that, of course, is that these are materials that could conceivably, reshape a raw stock into something that is new and functional and renewed usability. And yet, for I think largely structural and incentive reasons, we have seen very limited amounts of recycling and reshaping of existing parts into new goods. And so that'd be a challenge that I would pose to the panelists, that as you think about the next decade or more of companies' life cycles, how can we as a species, how can we as a world, how can we as an additive manufacturing community do better at being efficient in terms of our raw material usage and the consumption that we can support?
That's a great question. May I?
Yeah, go for it.
So, we established earlier this year a dedicated unit, and OpEx is key for everyone. What we established a dedicated unit focusing only on sustainability, because for us, mindful manufacturing is key. We are going to be, as an industry, a major player in manufacturing. We cannot do it without sustainability in mind. And we joined as a founding member the association, the Green Additive Manufacturing Association, and we are investing money from the get-go. So in gate one, all of us have gates. In development, we are already asking people how it will impact the environment. This is something new we just introduced this year, because it's clear for us that sustainability is key. You cannot lead a revolution in the current situation, like floods in New York, for example. And what we see with the climate change, you cannot do it without sustainability. And there is so much to do. Recycling is one of them, reuse is one of them, the way you design for the environment, or you design for sustainability. But there is also a lot to do on the material side. And we are going to pick key projects. We have a long list, but we need to keep key project and to go from sustainability level 1 to 2 and 3. But we are starting the journey today, and I think it's something that the entire industry will need to adapt if we really want to be a manufacturing player, because we need to come with a new message. We cannot be the same, manufacturing and said we don't care about the environment. Yes, we care, and we have the tool, the digitalization, and moving from physical inventory to digital inventory is already huge contribution to the environment and supply chain. So I'm very proud to take part out of it and to lead this type of change.
I appreciate companies, and I appreciate that Tyler even brought it up in the first place. I mean, that's the first thing I think about when I wake up in the morning. I think, it has to be beyond recycling to energy usage and all sorts of stuff that we probably need to devote a whole day to. if not our lifetimes. But maybe I want to turn it back to Max, that question. I didn't want to just leave it hanging there about whether or not you're going to be pursuing upmarket products and markets.
We want to pursue all of the biggest opportunities in digital fabrication. So that can happen at different price points. Our most recent products, Form 3L and Fuse, have been at higher price points than the Form line. Today, we don't see the biggest opportunities on the very high end, though, and you probably won't see us introduce printers that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. We are focused on the 80-20 approach, and that means we won't cover everything for everyone, but as long as we're covering the biggest opportunities, and that certainly includes high volume applications. We've got dental customers who produce hundreds of thousands of parts per year. We have last year our customers produced 20 million COVID test swabs. So I would say don't confuse the price of an individual printer with is it suitable for high volume applications. We're certainly doing those applications.
Okay, I think something that I thought was somewhat relevant to the talk about the future of the industry and supplanting manufacturing and things like that. This question would go to Greg. I know that to me, at least, it seems like service bureaus are going to be probably the key aspect of making that transition. I imagine Shapeways and companies like it are going to play the role of contract manufacturers in a lot of ways do today. So what do you see the role of service bureaus being in, I guess, transitioning the 13 trillion manufacturing industry into additive manufacturing?
Yeah, what we see here at Shapeways is we're very complementary to the other major players in space. And so we look to be agnostic to the different hardware technologies and materials and really lean into what's really being the most innovative in the space. And working with the hardware manufacturers and the material manufacturers to provide solutions where there may be customers that want to go buy machines and materials and deploy that, and we fully support that. But there's also opportunity for them to use Shapeways, or businesses like Shapeways as a strong downsell solution. And Shapeways is able to manage that through our software. And so we also then can work very collectively with the hardware and material manufacturers to upsell machines and hardware as those things start to become insourced. And so we see ourselves complementary in the space, and we see ourselves as a way to be a sales enabler of a lot of the hardware, innovation, materials that are really out there today. And we see that with our customers now, right? We have customers using certain technologies internally to Shapeways that may end up investing in that technology internally and moving that, but they usually pick one or two technologies or one or two materials. They don't typically invest in the full suite of the 90 materials and finishes that Shapeways has to offer. And so we can be very complementary to them by offering them the long tail of solutions to really complement all of their needs internally. And so we see ourselves as complementary, and we see ourselves as a way to potentially really help accelerate the rollout of and adoption of a lot of the technologies that are coming to market today.
That's great. Yeah, and sort of how I envisioned it. So let's see. I think we're supposed to end a little bit at 11:45 or 12:45, but I think we're gonna be able to go on a little bit longer than that, so everybody can enjoy the conversation a little bit longer. So I wanted to pass this question from the audience over to Mohsen. So it looks like he answered it in the chat, but it might be, actually we have got another awesome question. And that's for Mohsen also. How do standards impact the investment environment? Like how do standards improve the investment environment or improve the industry for investment?
Absolutely. Yeah. Great question. Well, standards are enablers, right? They build confidence in the use of technology, and we often measure maturity of an industry sector by the number of standards that exist around it. If you look at some of the fully matured industry sectors, been around for many years, like oil and gas, which is, by the way, one of the biggest sectors in terms of reliance on standards, we see hundreds of standards that facilitate trade and create trust and confidence in consumers. So we believe setting an inaccurate expectations for the investors is a major pitfall. And let's face it, this has happened, unfortunately, a number of times in the past, and we've seen examples. And by creating unrealistic expectations, we can only damage this industry. It is evolving. It had its own journey. It takes time to fully mature. And we've seen examples that investors have been pulled off due to not meeting goals, where we believe by defining the right level of expectations, those situations could have been avoided where a business dismantled its AM operation. So in additive manufacturing, some of the key challenges historically, and it's still today, has been around reliability and consistency of the systems. Many of our standards have supported bringing additional trust to the supply chain in that regards, which we believe is very critical. However, still there are major gaps that exist and we need to close. Of course, everyone is interested in additional throughput, speed, accuracy, larger builds envelopes, but achieving quality is still very key. And we've seen challenges, for instance, in multi-laser, multi-power sources systems in terms of reliability. And one example is around part acquisitions also. The challenge is that service business in general is somewhat crowded and will continue to be crowded. And the biggest challenge we've observed is around consistency and reliability. Users often complain that acquiring parts from different service providers is lack of consistency. And one of our standards, ISO ASTM 52901, has focused on defining and specifying requirements for purchased parts made by AM. It gives guidelines for the elements that needs to be exchanged between the customer and part provider from A to Z. Now, going back to your question, the way we contribute and help investors is really around bringing additional trust into the technology. Clearly, investors will be able to more confidently invest in the market by standardization, and that's where we believe true adoption can start to unfold. AM is still a tiny part of the entire manufacturing sector, right? No one argues that, and we have a long way to go and compete with other cost-effective technologies. How can we get faster? How can we get there faster? It really depends, of course, on further developments of the technology, hardware, software, and materials that are key, but without considering impacts of the standards and qualification and certification, full implementation still will be years away. I'll give an example here. Since 2000, around 100 part or so has been cleared by FDA. This number, of course, is much smaller when it comes to aviation sector FAA approval process. Today, we see big challenges in overcoming regulatory hurdles, predominantly due to lack of standards, and that has been really getting resolved, and we're certainly able to help with that via our products and services.
Thank you so much, Mohsen. Thanks. I think it's interesting. I think that we're looking at medical parts. Mohsen talked about that. We're looking at stuff that's inside the body, and that's been an application that's actually been, well, it's been the next big thing for 20 years, right? Orthopedic implants and things like that. But if we look at an orthopedic implant, we can change the surface texture. to get a better bone adhesion. We could change the wicking properties of the parts. We could change the modulus of this implant to better approximate bone. And we can produce these implants cheaper than the traditional manufacturing methods, up to maybe a factor of 10. And we can develop them faster and change them faster. And from an IP generation point of view, we could maybe make a custom texture that's the best bone adhesion texture. So to me, orthopedics is a really high touch kind of application that's huge, and everybody's very excited about it. Do you guys see other similar applications that are as big or that you're that excited about?
Absolutely, Joris. I think, look, the materials enable applications. It wasn't until we had cobalt, chrome, and titanium that took off in the metal powder bed fusion space, right? And now you're starting to see those materials in binder jet, and so you'll see binder jet get traction there. I think that you need a few things to get parts in production. It's very easy to spot where the holes and the opportunities are in this space. If you look at a part that has lattices, for example, which people have been making all the way back since Within started coming up with interesting software over a decade ago, you still don't have good metrology technology to ensure that what you just produced doesn't have defective lattices in a part. So it's kind of hard to put it in mass production, right? CT is too expensive. There's no end of part inspection process that's high speed like you have like you, for example, have CMM when you do all the type of components. You're not going to do CMM on a lattice. So there's a lot of parts of this puzzle that and opportunities for entrepreneurs to really innovate and bring technology to market at scale. I think one of the parts that you haven't touched on yet is biofabrication is an area that we're very excited. We've have a whole business that we've started around it and are spending a significant amount of capital in, and that's there's been 20 years of research in university, and now taking that out of university and making it into real products that have PMAs and 510Ks is kind of the next step for that industry. In this decade, I think we're going to see some thriving, just like you saw the past decade. You saw orthopedics enter into its first phase, which was sort of mass cost. I would say 5 sizes. In the future, you'll have patient specific on orthopedics, but that requires scanning and other workflows. So, you outside of trauma, but there's tons of opportunities in healthcare and dental itself is every part is custom, and that is a healthcare application with FDA Class 2 devices, and there's huge opportunity here. And I think in dental, every component, ceramic, metal, and polymer will be printed by the end of the decade. That's $30 to $40 billion worth of parts a year. Casting is an area that only has 5% penetration despite the technology and finally being mature. And all casting will be digital in the future, this decade. I don't think we'll be. I think that is something that is really starting to happen at higher volume and larger scale. So I'm very bullish on the on many of these markets. At the end of the day, you need the surface finish, you need the tolerances, you need the throughput to have a cost-effective solution, and you need the material properties. And when you have a combination of those things, which is what this industry has been working on, and lots of little verticals and compendium of applications, like you have said it early on, you actually can have product market fit. And so.
Yeah. By the way, I completely agree with Rick. There's so many applications out there, like take molds, for example. The materials are getting better, and we will disrupt many different applications. And just want to relate, if I may, to a question from the audience about photopolymers and sustainability. We are aware of it, okay? And we are doing things on it, and we are not just greenwashing it. We are aware of it. There are applications like dental, which you can do only with photopolymers and specific materials, but still there are ways to do it. So I'm sure that the industry, in a few years, we'll have direct aligners. So you don't need to print the entire model. You save tons of material and you will be more sustainable. And we'll have reuse of photopolymers models in the future. We are working on it, and we are not just, hiding behind it. So thank you for the question, whoever asked it from the audience.
Yeah. Definitely. So what I'd like to do is a bit, if there's anybody who want to respond to this specifically, that's totally fine as well. But what I'd like to do is first ask you two questions. I think one is like for everybody, essentially, like if you'd want to answer it. It's like Rapid is upcoming. It's around the corner. We're doing this in advance of Rapid. So what's everybody expecting of Rapid? Just as an event, and then just for yourselves. Are you very excited to see everyone again? Is it going to be a big thing? What are you guys expecting from Rapid?
I was hoping to be a hugger, but it looks like COVID's coming back, so we'll be. It's too bad, but I'm looking forward to seeing all our friends and colleagues. It's been too long.
Yeah, same here, and I think that it will be kind of a turning point because we are in an inflection point. We have more awareness from customers. We see more deals happening. We see that people are putting their feet in the water in terms of additive manufacturing, and we see some taking big risks from Fortune 100 in terms of moving to manufacturing. And I think that this Rapid, we will see more and more people talking about manufacturing, but also doing it. So it will be a kind of a point in the history where we will start moving into manufacturing. But still, I'm looking forward to hug everyone.
And I would echo what Yoav said as well. I think it'll be interesting. We'll see what the turnout is next week, and everybody being mindful of of COVID and lots of personal sort of reasons around who will show and who won't. But we'll see what happens next week. But there is certainly an excitement building. And I think we expect that will carry on through Rapid, and then through into Formnext and other conferences throughout the balance of the year. So some of it's out of all of our control, obviously, but it's certainly an exciting time, and we think that there's going to be a lot of interest next week.
Yeah, and I think the thing that can't be replicated in Zoom is all the scuttlebutt that happens on the floor. I mean, there's always a lot of rumor mongering. There's deals that are happening, capital that's flowing. You kind of hear all that on the floor. So I'm excited to see that. Also, it was a couple of years ago, there's a lot of people with 3D printed glasses. I'm curious who's going to have 3D printed masks, instruments, other stuff. And I'm also curious with all the money coming in, who's going to have the biggest booth. Always seems to be a game. So I'll be judging.
Anyone else want to talk about Rapid?
Yeah, one thing that we definitely will see that the enthusiasm of the industry and users in going back to some normality is quite evident. I think whoever we talk to doesn't care, looks like, about the situation. People really wanted to go back to face-to-face interaction. And I think our industry will certainly benefit from that. And hopefully Rapid, Formnext, and other venues provide that opportunity to get back together, because this is an ecosystem. Collaboration is obviously very key. And these events, I think, are crucial in contributing more maturing the industry and technology.
Yeah, no, very definitely. And so just a little bit, I want to give everybody a little bit of opportunity. We saw this in the last panel. I thought it was really good. And just to have like a little bit of a send-off kind of thing. If there is something you haven't been able to see or say, or haven't, Yoav, for example, or somebody who says, hey, I've left that out. I really wanted to end with this. I really wanted to have this talking point right in front of me, and haven't been able to mention it. So if somebody has a point like that, or got something they want to share with us that they haven't been able to, we'd love to give you the opportunity now. So,
I think we have a great industry. You can see it here from the panel, and together we can make it happen. And I guess we will. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Yoav. Thank you so much. How about you, Tyler? Do you have any kind of last words kind of thing to sum up for us?
I'm just tremendously excited to see what the next decade of growth is going to bring. We have so many young upstarts out there that are going to become the next panelists at the Venture Summit of the next decade. And if that happens to you in the audience, please get in touch. Asimov Ventures.
Definitely. How about you, Max? Do do you have something you want to leave us with? Some words you want to leave us with?
I'm excited to see all of you at Rapid. Stop by our booth. I haven't had nearly enough customer FaceTime, so if you use our printers or thinking about it, please come by. Love to meet you. Thank you for putting this event together, guys.
Thank you for coming, Max. Thank you so much. And how about you, Rick? You want to say a little goodbye or something like that?
I think, I want to commend you and John for coordinating such a great event, great list of folks from the industry in both sessions, and looking forward to seeing everyone face to face. It's still in a small industry where we all know each other. I think 10 years from now, it'll be this massive thing, and probably lots of companies the size that our companies are today that will be major players. We won't even know the people. So if this develops the way that other markets have developed, I think we'll, it's great that had a chance to be part of it when it was this size and know everyone. So I'm excited for the next week, and I don't know if FormNext is going to be happening, but definitely I think Rapid is going to be a fantastic event this year.
Yeah, totally. Like the 3D printing industry is a story of like the parties are getting worse, but the watches are getting better. So that's so far we're doing okay. How about you, Greg? You want to say something to everyone?
No, I just wanted to thank everybody. It was really good to see everyone. It's always interesting to see so many faces all at the same time. So yeah, it's been a really exciting last 12 months, I think, for the industry in general. And I'm looking forward selfishly for Shapeways for the next 30 days. But I'm also excited about all the things that are happening with all the other companies that are listed here today. I think there's a lot of interesting partnerships and ways for us to work more collaboratively together to go and move the industry forward. So, but thanks for putting this together. It's great to see everyone.
Thank you. No, go ahead. I was just gonna see if we left anybody out, like Mark or Mohsen.
Sure. Yeah, I would say thank you for having us as part of this panel. It was great to see everyone, and we see further evolution of the ecosystem, and obviously collaboration is key. In the past, companies had more concern about sharing information and data with the standards community. We see now that has changed and will continue to evolve, which is great and very positive. ASTM, as the leader in the standard development, will continue to provide solutions via standardization, training, and advisory services to support industrialization of the technology and de-risk it, so everyone can safely and securely rely on it. And we believe lack of qualification and certification frameworks is quite evident. We'll get there, hopefully faster than other technologies that have been adopted. I will end with that you either impact and influence the standardization by participating on it, or you will be impacted once the standards are out. You better be part of it.
Yeah, definitely, totally. Mark or anyone else want to say something?
Yeah, thank you. I've really appreciated being a part of the panel. I think there's been some really good critical questions that have been asked, and I think we've approached it from a number of different perspectives, and it's always interesting to hear different perspectives from the venture community, from the analyst community, from our peers in the industry. I think, from our perspective at Markforged, we're excited about the balance of the year. We've got some new products and new features, new software that we've announced and are rolling out through the balance of this year and into the first quarter of next year. And I think if there's anything sort of to leave with the community of listeners, it is really our focus on our platform, which is sort of that connection of the materials with the software, with the hardware, and how we view that holistically, and our tight focus on the manufacturing world and the industries that we focus on specifically within the manufacturing world. And we're excited to continue on this journey, and look forward to spending more time with all of you in the future.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add is thanks everybody for joining, and commend everybody on the panel for driving this industry forward. It's really impressive from where this industry's grown to where it is today. But we're still early innings, and obviously thanks to everybody who's hired Stifel and everyone who hasn't. Shame on you. Maybe next time.
Thank you so much, Mark and Brian. Yeah, thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for being here today. I thought we had a really stellar. We had more CEOs of publicly traded 3D printing companies than there were in the whole world a couple of years ago. So it was a very exciting turnout for us. I think a really good discussion. And we really enjoy doing this. If it's up to me, I totally want to do this again next year. I really would like to track our progress through this event. I really enjoyed it. I hope the listeners enjoyed it. I hope the panelists enjoyed it. And thank you so much for your time today, everyone. And thank you for your attention. And have a wonderful rest of the week. And thank you for being at this wonderful event. And my name is Joris Peels. And thanks to Michael and myself. We really enjoyed hosting you. Thanks for Stifel for making this possible as well. And thanks for everyone for attending. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.